Probably heard what happened in Spain. There was a blackout.
Millions of people across Spain and Portugal have been hit by massive power cuts
after one of the biggest electrical blackouts in Europe's history.
Now, I don't know exactly what happened that day, and honestly, I don't think anyone fully does. There are theories, technical explanations, warnings from years past, and of course, there are fears. People worried it might happen again. Others wondered if it was a test, but I don't think anyone considered this. Because in moments like that, something else can happen, something most people aren't even aware of. And in this video, I'll show you a side of it no one's really talking about. Not in the headlines, not in the explanations, but it matters maybe more than we realize. In Spain, when the grid failed, something else revealed itself. It didn't appear on camera or in official reports. It was felt in the stillness between thoughts. In that unfamiliar pause, many people, perhaps without realizing it, felt something shift. It didn't last long, but it didn't need to. Because the truth is, most of us live in a compressed layer of experience, what many now refer to as the 3D state. It's shaped by constant reaction, overstimulation, and interruption, a loop of input that rarely allows for depth. And when that loop suddenly cuts out, even by accident, another frequency becomes available. Some call it presence, others describe it as coherence, or simply quiet. In those moments, people report time slowing down, inner sensations amplifying, memories resurfacing without warning, and a strange awareness that feels older than thought, filtered only by the absence of distraction. Neuroscience calls this interoception, your ability to feel internal states without distraction. But some traditions speak of it differently. They describe these moments as contact with a subtler layer of consciousness, a dimension not above, but within. This is where the idea of a new Earth quietly enters the picture. Not a new planet, not a new government, a new frequency, one that's always been there, beneath the overlays. And now, through contrast, we're beginning to notice it. These power failures, accidental or not, offer more than disruption. They reveal contrast. They break the spell of constant stimulation long enough for something else to emerge. For just a moment, the old frequency drops, and what remains might be the one that was always waiting. According to data from the American Psychological Association, the average person today receives more information in 24 hours than someone in the 15th century received in a lifetime. Much of it is visual, fast-paced, and emotionally charged. This constant exposure triggers the brain's salience network, a system designed to detect threats and prioritize attention. In small doses, it's adaptive. In excess, it creates chronic stress. A 2017 study published in Nature Communications showed that prolonged sensory input, especially digital media, leads to higher baseline cortisol levels, lower sleep efficiency, and reduced memory consolidation. Cognitive fatigue increases even without physical effort. Beyond the brain, overstimulation affects the autonomic nervous system. When exposed to high-frequency input, light, sound, movement, the sympathetic system becomes dominant. Heart rate remains elevated. Respiratory rhythms shorten. Digestive and immune functions are deprioritized. The vagus nerve, responsible for parasympathetic regulation, becomes underactive. This disrupts the body's ability to return to baseline. In 2019, researchers at the University of Zurich found that just 10 minutes of stimulus deprivation, no light, no sound, led to measurable improvements in heart rate variability and alpha brainwave activity. These are markers of physiological recovery. What the data shows is consistent. When input is constant, recovery is impaired. The system adapts to stay alert, but in doing so, it loses access to slower rhythms, those required for integration, repair, and stable focus. Environments saturated with artificial stimulation limit the brain's default mode network, the system active during rest, reflection, and long-term memory formation. In short, without space, the system remains in reaction, and most people operate like this for years without interruption. When the lights go out, that interruption finally happens, and the body begins to shift. automatically, into a mode it rarely reaches in daily life. The structure of modern life is not stable. It's overstimulated, fragmented, and constantly accelerating. This is what many now identify as the old Earth, a system where attention is externally managed and internal awareness is suppressed. The signs are visible: rising burnout, declining focus, sleep disorders, and growing emotional volatility. None of this is accidental. It's the result of environments that overload the nervous system while disconnecting people from their own perception. But something has started to change. More people are noticing the dissonance. They feel that something is off, even if they can't name it. They begin asking questions they've never asked before, and they start shifting behaviors: fewer hours online, more time alone, increased sensitivity to noise, light, and speed. The blackout in Spain accelerated this process. It wasn't just a power outage, it was a sudden break in the system's rhythm, a forced interruption of everything familiar. And for many, that created space to feel what normal life usually masks. When the external input stopped, something shifted. People became more aware of their surroundings, their breath, even their own thoughts. Some described a strange clarity, a sense of noticing things they usually ignore, not because something new appeared, but because the usual noise was no longer in the way. These kinds of events can act as catalysts. They highlight how artificial the system has become, and once that contrast is felt, it's difficult to ignore. This is how the shift begins, not through ideology, but through experience. The moment people recognize the dysfunction of the old environment and how different they feel outside of it, they begin to move. Awareness grows, behavior changes, and once you've seen the system clearly, you can't unsee it. As more people begin to see the imbalance in the environment they've accepted as normal, some go a step further. They start seeking out that stillness deliberately. In recent years, practices like darkness retreats have become increasingly studied and documented. Originally rooted in monastic disciplines from Tibet and India, they're now appearing in wellness, neuroscience, and even high-performance research. In a darkness retreat, participants live in complete blackness for several days, sometimes up to 10. There are no distractions, no light cues, no external input. The results have drawn attention from both scientists and clinicians. In 2019, a study published in Frontiers in Psychology followed individuals who completed a 6-day dark retreat. EEG scans showed increased activity in alpha and theta brainwave states, linked to memory processing, emotional integration, and neuroplasticity. Subjects reported intensified awareness of internal states, improved sleep quality after the retreat, and reduced baseline anxiety. These effects aren't limited to retreat settings. Controlled sensory deprivation used in float tanks or silent environments has shown similar outcomes. A 2020 meta-analysis by the University of British Columbia found that even short-term exposure to low-stimulation environments improved heart rate variability, reduced cortisol, and enhanced sustained attention over a 72-hour period. The common factor is not the technique, but the absence of input. By limiting visual, auditory, and cognitive noise, the body begins to recalibrate without external intervention. These are not extreme states. They are baseline responses, built in, automatic. For many, the blackout was accidental. For others, choosing to step back has become a conscious practice, not because they reject the modern world, but because they want to access something it rarely offers: uninterrupted internal space. And the more people discover what exists in that space, the more difficult it becomes to return to how things were. The more researchers study silence and isolation, the more they discover something unexpected. The body doesn't weaken in these conditions, it begins to optimize. At the University of Minnesota, one of the quietest places on Earth was built for acoustic testing, an anechoic chamber that absorbs 99.9% of sound. Participants often stay inside for just minutes before reporting unusual sensations, like hearing their own heartbeat, muscle tension, or the flow of blood. But beyond the initial discomfort, the data shows a physiological reset begins to occur. Heart rate slows, breath deepens, neural oscillations shift from beta into alpha and theta. states associated with integration, memory, and internal coherence. In parallel, NASA has conducted extensive studies on prolonged sensory reduction during mission simulations. In analog Mars habitats, astronauts live without natural light, without dynamic soundscapes, and with strict digital limits. The findings? Not deterioration, but adaptation. In a 2021 report from the Human Research Program, researchers observed that individuals exposed to stimulus-controlled environments showed improvements in stress regulation, sleep quality, and cognitive processing speed. The physiology is clear. Remove high-frequency external input, and the internal systems begin to self-organize. The vagus nerve activates, hormonal rhythms reset. Even immune function shows improvement. What looks like emptiness from the outside is in reality a highly intelligent rebalancing system built into the human body. This is why people often return from dark retreats or silent protocols not disoriented, but focused, not drained, but clearer, and why brief moments of stillness, even accidental ones, like the blackout, can unlock physiological responses that have been waiting in the background all along. The changes we've seen, how the brain shifts in silence, how the body rebalances in low-stimulus environments, aren't isolated. They're happening at scale. In recent years, researchers have noted a measurable rise in behaviors that suggest a shift in collective attention: digital minimalism, silent retreats, circadian optimization, light fasting, breath work, low-stimulus architecture. None of these were mainstream a decade ago, but they all point to the same thing. People are beginning to change the way they relate to input. A 2023 report by the Global Wellness Institute showed a 38% increase in participation in silence-based or low-sensory environments, ranging from therapeutic float tanks to technology-free retreats. These are not fringe cases. The growth is measurable across age, culture, and profession. The same trend appears in design. Architects and urban planners are now building with neurosensory balance in mind. Softer lighting, acoustic insulation, reduced color noise, intentional quiet zones. These aren't aesthetic choices. They're based on data from occupational health and cognitive performance labs. In Tokyo, Helsinki, and Berlin, low-stimulus public spaces have shown measurable benefits in mood regulation and decision quality, especially in high-stress populations. This isn't just about comfort, it's about function. As awareness spreads, individuals begin designing their lives around nervous system regulation, not just productivity. What we're seeing is not a withdrawal from society, it's the emergence of a new operational mode, where less input means better output, where attention is directed inward before being projected outward, where response replaces reaction. These changes may not be happening everywhere, but they are happening everywhere at once. And if the current system represented one phase of development, then this shift, quiet, biological, and widespread, could mark the beginning of the next one. All over the world, something is changing in how people define value. In surveys across education, health, business, and even urban policy, there's a growing trend away from speed, scale, and constant availability, and toward depth, intention, and systems that promote internal balance. In 2022, the Edelman Trust Barometer reported a decline in institutional trust across every sector: government, media, technology, but an increase in trust toward sources perceived as consistent, direct, and personally verifiable. This points to a shift away from abstraction and toward lived experience. This is also reflected in health behaviors. According to the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Heart Lab, more patients are now asking about stress regulation, sleep optimization, and breath work than ever before. Topics that used to be secondary are now central. In education, programs centered on sensory awareness, cognitive resilience, and digital boundaries are being piloted in multiple countries, not for ideological reasons, but because overstimulation has measurable impacts on learning outcomes. And even in technology, there's movement. Designers are being asked to build for friction, not addiction. Apps with time limits, phones with grayscale modes, not because they're trendy, but because there's a growing demand for tools that support attention instead of fragmenting it. These patterns don't point to the collapse of a system, they suggest a quiet reconfiguration. Less output for its own sake, more awareness of conditions, less reaction, more decision. If the previous environment was defined by volume, this one appears to prioritize signal. And if we're in a transition, it's not ideological, it's behavioral. It's not a theory, it's already happening. What happened in Spain might seem distant, but the silence it created was familiar because we rarely hear it. For a few hours, the usual signals stopped, and some people noticed things they hadn't before. Not dramatic, just different, maybe clearer. If you've ever felt that something wasn't quite right with the way things usually are, feel free to share it below. And if this made sense to you, consider subscribing. No pressure, just more of this when you're ready for it.